All right, so we are here. Okay, sorry about that, guys. Running a little bit behind. This is the second Back to Black panel where we talk about accuracy versus acceptance. I want to say hi to everybody, introduce myself. I'm Troy Jeffrey Allen, and we're hanging out right now with Devon Camel. What's up, Devon?
How you doing, Troy?
Yeah, what's going on? David Crownson.
Hello.
Carl Reed.
How's it going?
Dr. Shamika Mitchell.
Good afternoon.
All right, and Shamika, you have to be scholarly because you have a doctor in front of your name. So
That is a respected title.
Do that,
right.
do that again with an accent.
You're the only one.
Okay.
It's like,
Tyrone Jackson, what's going
I'm
on,
a
man?
doctor.
What's up, Tyrone Jackson? How's it going, man? I think you might be on mute, or am I losing you here?
Yeah.
There he is. Okay, Tyrone Jackson. And Beddo, what's up, buddy?
What's up, everybody?
All right, so guys, this of course is called accuracy versus acceptance, or acceptance versus accuracy. So off the break, I just want to get your idea on one or the other or both. What is acceptance and what is accuracy to you? And I'm going to go around the grid here, and I'm gonna start with you, Devon. What does accuracy mean, and what does acceptance mean to you, and like how do those two things work together or clash? And I know I put you in the hot seat. I'm so sorry.
It's cool. I have these conversations on a daily.
Okay, there you go. I figure we all be prepared for this. So,
Yeah, like acceptance to me would be if something is inspired or influenced by another culture, even though it's not completely accurate to that influence, but it's just enough where it's not offensive, and where you could see that there was effort behind it, and that it wasn't just a lazy attempt to try to just be like, "Ooh, I'm gonna go do this because it's the popular trend now, so I'm gonna chase that trend." But when you actually see the effort being put forward into it, like that, what I think acceptance is. And then accuracy is when it's like point for point, your attempt to incorporate something into a story, and that everybody, including the person that created it, gets the point that you were trying to get across in your body of work.
absolutely. What about you, David? Accuracy versus acceptance. Yep, all you.
All right. I just think with it goes back to my comic book series, Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer. When I was doing research on on Harriet Tubman, at first I had a lot of trouble because it was very like everything I got was like a very serious, intense person. But for me, when I write my characters, I got to have something quirky about them for me to relate to it. And I had a lot of trouble writing her. So, the accuracy was the authenticity of this very real world seriousness of it. But then doing more research and finding out that Harriet Tubman had a great sense of humor and cracked jokes a lot to keep people calm. And I'm like, oh, she was funny. In the face of all that, she was able to show up as like that as a leader. And I'm like, oh, that's who I want to write about. I want to write about like that version of her as a hero. So like, I just think acceptance is just like everything, good, bad, things we didn't even know about. And accuracy is, still holding true to the substance of what it is. But I think acceptance goes a bit deeper, if I'm concerned. Like my girlfriend loves me for being a good listener and all that stuff, but she loves me for the weird way that I sip my coffee. And sometimes I'm 10 minutes late.
But that makes you a well-rounded character. So there you go. Yes. Carl, what about you? Let's hear from you about accuracy versus acceptance.
There can be like a duality to both, right? I see accuracy can be it can be seen as pure like authenticity, like Devon was saying, point for point, on point and factual. But it can also have this other side of authenticity and be accurate to the subject matter and maybe or to the audience and to the intent without actually being accurate to the actual events point by point. Acceptance, kind of building off what David was saying, there's a very positive side of acceptance where someone truly, wants all of what something is, whether it's a different culture, and they're absorbing it for all of the positive benefits. But then there's another side of acceptance where it's superficial, and we've been seeing lately, you'll see, a, a a TV show or a comic that's starring black characters, and it's not a black character or black creator around, or a black creator is added to be that face. And so while you're accepting and trying to, you might have the best intention, and you're like, we want to accept black people as a part of our society. We want to accept these characters in these stories. It's about how you go about it. So you can accept me or not accept me, but it doesn't kind of negate what that culture or that character or that story has to offer. But of course, with that the positive acceptance, it just elevates it even more.
Right, and that's artistic integrity, which is always important. Dr. Shamika Mitchell, how do you feel on the subject of accuracy versus acceptance? Or do they fight each other? Do they have to fight each other?
They don't have to fight each other, but there is an issue regarding who the subject matter is pertaining to. And so if you are writing about, say, a population that's experienced significant crimes against humanity, for example, Native Americans, right? And you're trying to capture the voice of the Cherokee or the voice of the Iroquois, and you got all of the details wrong, that's a problem. It isn't just feathers in a cap. There is something about trying to portray the subject in a way that has more integrity. And the same could be said for any group that gets homogenized, right? And so what happens with African Americans in certain parts of the South, the culture in South Carolina, like my maternal family's from the Gullah Geechee corridor, is not the same as my father's culture from Louisiana Creole. And so if you're just trying to say like, yeah, we're going to just do cornbread and gumbo, like you've got two different regions, two different kinds of food. If you're telling a specific story, then the accuracy becomes more important. But at the same time, in terms of acceptance, I would say if you run it by people from those communities that you're trying to represent, whether they're yours or not, if they're okay with the way that it came across, then I think you're on the right track. If you're trying to do something that's homogenous, like a Wakanda, then, there's a lot more flexibility because it's fictional. But if you're trying to root yourself in history, then you've got to pay closer attention to the details.
Absolutely. What about you, Tyrone? How do you feel on the subject?
Can everybody hear me first?
Yeah.
Just want to make sure. Okay,
Yes.
Cool. Well, everybody kind of already hit on a lot of the subject matter that I think, but I agree with everyone when it comes to that, like with accuracy and stuff like that. Like Dr. Shamika Mitchell was saying, like for me being a black male from North Carolina, there's a lot of things that we do back home in North Carolina that maybe a black person from New York may not do, or a black person from Detroit may not do. Certain slang and terminology and ways that we speak and ways that we carry ourselves, ways that we dress, music we listen to, so much stuff. So when it comes to accuracy, I think you're hitting on all of those based off of that character and where that character's from. For instance, like I wouldn't write a character from Nigeria the same way I would write a character from Miami, Florida. To be accurate, I would write them based on their cultural differences and possibly their cultural similarities, if there are those points. Like if I were to write a character who was on the spectrum or something like that, I would not write them the same way that I would write a normal character. Just to get that accuracy and based off of those characters and how they are and how they act and how they perceive to certain things. And when it comes to acceptance, like everybody already said, like I look at acceptance. To me, I kind of look at it as a double-edged sword, kind of, because there is acceptance where a lot of people go for, where it's just accepting anything that's put out there, no matter what it is. Like, we got a black character, and it's like, but is that black character true to the black culture, or are they just a character? Like, are they what is this character about? What's accepting of them? What do we have? And then, of course, you have some individuals who will go and they will, with that same acceptance, they will dive into accuracy to make sure that the character is accepted across the board by many different people. Like if someone were to write a guy from North Carolina, and me being from North Carolina, and they just make him this black dude, this tobacco chewing, tobacco spitting, I'm talk like this type of black dude. I'm like, nah, I'm from North Carolina. I don't talk like that. So it's like, I wouldn't be accepting of that, and I think other people from North Carolina, other black dudes from North Carolina, would be like, I'm not accepting. That's not me. We don't act like that, so, yeah, so it's kind of those things. I think both can play well with each other. But with acceptance, I think in some cases, as creators or as individuals accepting certain things, we got to kind of be wary of what we accept, because if you're accepting of everything, then we'll start getting trash, and that's what none of us want. So, but yeah, that's how I see both. So.
Okay, all right. And I think we're doing something right because we already got a troll in the chat. Beddo, how do you feel on the subject?
Everybody could hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I think with acceptance, it really depends on who's putting the product out there. Like, for example, me, myself, I'm a comic book collector since I was a young kid. And as most of you know, the amount of black characters or superheroes that were around back in the days wasn't anything close to the variety that we have now. So let's look at one of our most popular black superheroes. Shamika also bought a Black Panther, written by a white man, right? So to me, it can't be 100% accurate, as it's not coming from a black person. Now it's up to people to accept this character. It goes into how much research was put into it, how much heart was put into the character, and if they're really being genuine about it. If you look at a character like Black Panther, it's accepted across the board by black people and probably every other type of people as well, just because it's lasted the test of time and what was put into the character. So it really depends on the heart that's put into the writing and also the research. Now, if there was a African prince or an African king who decided to write a character like that, then you'd really get an accurate portrayal of that character, right? So it really depends on what's behind it. I think has a lot to do with it.
No, absolutely. I can tell you personally, I was the hater in my squad for a while because, I wasn't all about Miles Morales until the movie came out. Because previous to that, it was largely white creators who had been working on that character. And then the movie dropped, and you have, first of all, a black actor voicing the character, so he sounds authentic. And then you have a director behind the camera doing the same thing. So very important. This past weekend, there was a whole DC Fandom event, right? And they gave a lot of lip service to inclusion and representation and all these buzzwords that we hear all the time on a regular basis, right? But one bit stuck out particularly for me. It was a quote from Ken Lashley, and I'm just paraphrasing here, but he mentioned that what we're seeing now in 2020 is we are transitioning from kind of the ugly corporatized phase of how we do diversity, and we're transitioning into something where we're actually getting creators of color into the creative sphere to tell these stories. And I was curious if you thought that we were transitioning into that space now, or is there still more work to do, or do you feel even comfortable in the space creating? And I'll just go around, and you can go in any direction you want to with this, but definitely raise your hand if you want to jump in as well. But Devon, how do you feel about that? Like, do you feel like we're transitioning into a better representation space than we were maybe 4 years ago?
I kind of think we are, because like I talk about with my friends, I like the mainstream comic industry is like dropped its shoulder if this was like a boxing match, and it's leaving itself wide open to a right hook for good, accurate storytelling and better types of stories to come out that aren't all one specific genre. Like there's stories coming from everywhere nowadays. So I think that we're in a good place where the indie comic market can really shine and make itself known.
Anybody else want to talk on that or speak on that?
I would jump in and say that one of the biggest things that has brought about that change is the internet age and the digital age. Whereas anybody with a computer with internet access can upload their stuff onto the web and have a worldwide audience, right? Whereas 20, 30 years ago, if you're not producing a comic with one of the big two companies and getting that worldwide distribution, then you're really in a bubble. I'm sure most of you might have heard of or remember Brother Man Comics.
Oh, yeah.
The brother from Philly, which was back in, I believe it was the 90s. That might have been one of the first instances where independent comic creator got wider distribution, where it was going nationwide and even to other countries, right? But now, internet's there, Instagram is there, Kickstarter, all these other platforms we can get yourself out to the world. So it really has leveled the playing field. I see stuff now that it's like way doper than stuff that's produced by any of the big companies. I mean, like David, your comic is mad dope. You're doing it yourself, and it's out there now, right? So it's a different age now.
Yeah, and I want to jump in because now we have, back in the 90s, it was kind of like, it's like, please pick me, please, Marvel, I want to work for you. But now I can just, I'll do a Kickstarter and I'll go, hey, go to peepgamecomics.com. And it's not just me, there's like 20 other people who are, dope and awesome. And you have like LionForge doing also dope things as well. And what's it called? Like, there's so many people doing dope stuff. So and also I'm going to be cocky and arrogant about this. I've talked to some comic stores where those Black indie books are selling more than some of the mainstream books. I found out from 3 stores that I outsold Spider-Man today. So breakfast was
your color, young sir.
But yeah, so I think we just have a wider platform, and then the internet is a big part in that. And having Black Comic Fest, the Schaumburg Festival, and ChemFest, like those are also very powerful places as well.
Absolutely.
But if I could, sorry, go ahead.
Building on
Tyrone.
Okay, go ahead, Tyrone.
I was just gonna say, if I could jump in, like also the thing too that I think, because like even with myself with Sovereign Comics, which is the comic company that I own, I have 5 titles. All of my titles have Black leads. All of my titles have female characters. They have all of this different things. But I think with a lot of it kind of goes back to that first conversation we were having with accuracy and acceptance. And in the indie comic world, because a lot of us who probably, because I know I was one of them, I present a script to DC, present a script to Marvel, like, hey, can I come on and be a writer? Get the no, So now I have my own company and I'm doing it myself, and people are coming over and they're like, oh, so you're where we can read some about Black characters who are the stereotypical Black character. Yes, I have Black villains. I have Black superheroes. I have Black bystanders. Like so many things. It's accepting. You have all. Not only are they Black characters, but I have Black characters from, like in my title Temple High. I have a Black character who's French. She's French, Black, and she has vitiligo, and people love her because she's just this one character that's just all of these different things, and everybody's like, wow. So now I've had people who, Black people who have vitiligo come to me. I'm like, thank you for making that character, And then I have characters who have albinism. I have another character, she's coming soon, and it's the reverse of albinism. The name is escaping me right now, but that's what she has, And I have like just all of these different Black characters to show, hey, there's more than one black person. We all don't look alike. We all don't sound alike. We all don't talk. We all don't talk alike. And all of that is in the story. And I think now, since there's so many black creators doing it, like all of us on this panel, black creators on other panels, people are seeing it now, and they're like, "Oh, so this is what I've been missing. Yeah, this is what you've been missing. So come on over and start buying some black comics." So.
I'm sorry, Carl. What was you were going to jump in here and say something? What were you going to say?
Yeah, you mentioned the age of kind of this corporatized diversity and things like that coming to an end. I think based on what Beddo and David and everybody was talking about with the internet and kind of the democratization of being able to get your content out there and going directly to the audience that wants it, what you're going to start seeing and what we have already started seeing is a retaliation, right, against the indie creator who has power to go to an audience that they don't even know about or respect, right? So, before, the power sat in retailers. If you can't get your book on the shelves, you can't sell your book. That's solved with the internet. If a company doesn't want to carry your character or your book or give you a chance to be an artist or a writer, you just can't do it. That's solved with the internet. And now you have YouTubers popping up displacing Hollywood. You have independent comic creators displacing this corporate environment. And so on one side, it's forcing them to look into different types of content. But on the other side, it's forcing them to think about how they can kind of stop the movement of that content. So, you look at some of the changes recently in like YouTube monetization, for instance, right? Let's do it for the kids. COPA, let's protect the kids and the data. But ultimately, what that did was it removed the ad dollars that was going to independent creators, and it decreased it by an order of magnitude. So ultimately, then YouTube went to the most popular or high end creators and formed personal deals with them, and are ushering direct payments and direct sweetheart deals from an ad perspective to them. So in the same vein, we have to kind of accept our victories, but we still don't be too careful, because on one side we're going to force a little bit of change, but on the other side we're going to force a retaliation. And if we can get ahead of that and understand what's coming and maybe build and own our own platforms like everybody here is doing, then we can build something that's pretty unstoppable. And we're not asking for permission. We're not asking for a corporation to change. What we're saying is it's a new world, and we're no longer accepting corporate domination. We're no longer accepting having to ask for permission to create content that looks like me or is from my perspective. And so, it's kind of a give and take.
We can do whatever we want.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we
Yes.
can hear you.
Yes.
So one of the things that I wound up being able to do last year, the U.S. Embassy of Algiers had invited me, Aletha Martinez and Stephen Harris, several other American artists to participate in their Comic-Con. And it's called the FIBTA. And I went to talk about my project, Fandom, focuses on Muslim nerds, geeks, creators. And it's gotten a lot of favorable response. But when I was shopping the book project, I was told, there's no real market, agents are like, well, we don't know. And so the corporatization is always going to be pertaining to sales. And, Kickstarter is wonderful, but in terms of the reach that people get, or in terms of the amount of support to get into bookstores, it's why some people are going back to Amazon and self-publishing, because even when they do have a quote diversity initiative, because they want to capitalize on that readership or audience for dollars, the reality is you've got a lot of white creators that are getting all kinds of funds to do Black, brown, you know, marginalized characters. You've got heterosexuals writing queer characters, but queer authors can't get a deal, you know. And there's something to be said about the way that marginalized, historically marginalized creators are still climbing uphill. Even when you do get a deal, you find out via Twitter, you know, the hashtag was what publishing paid me. What they offer people in terms of the contract, you know, who gets paid, how much they get paid, you know, they're throwing you, you know, $10,000, somebody else got 40,000. You know, there's something to be said about the tremendous inequity in the publishing industry that's old. It's been going on since, you know, there's been a publishing industry. And I think there's something that, you know, we still have to rely on our own talents and resources in order to be able to do the kind of work that we want and have the control that we want. I think that's always going to be a critical aspect of how it is that we move forward with, you know, multiculturalism, diversity, inclusion, and what kind of projects you want to make. If you're waiting for the establishment, they're going to cherry pick and they're going to control as much as they feel they can to get that money, you know. And so when I teach 19th century American lit and African American lit, you know, had the patron system, and that's how Frederick Douglass got his work out. That's how William Wells Brown got his work out. You know, you had people that invested in you, kind of like a Kickstarter. You weren't waiting for the publishers because the publishers said no Negroes. And so there was only one white publisher in Boston, William Lloyd Garrison and the Liberator, that was welcoming to women and Black people. Other than that, you had to come up with your own. And I think we're back to that, which is hilarious and ironic. Maybe it means that we get to have more creative control and also get the profits.
So actually, all right. So you actually bring up a really interesting point, Shamika. Something that it's been kicking around the back of my head is, when did this shift happen again? Like, you know what I mean? Like you talk about before, we had to basically do it ourselves in order to present our voice to the world. And then it just disappeared. Like, and I'm very curious if you have an opinion on this, and also to anybody else here, when did that stop? Because I know for me personally,
when did the integration start? Which one are you asking?
Right. I mean, that's also a fair question. That's a very good point.
So the integration, I would say that even during the Harlem Renaissance, you had people that were invested in independent Black press. You had the New Negro movement, and that was with Alain Locke. And they were a lot of these artist collectives where they were just working together and putting their material out. You had Paul Laurence Dunbar, not to give a history lesson, but Paul Laurence Dunbar was considered the first Negro poet laureate, and he dies in 1908, I want to say. But he was the first mainstream Black writer, and not doing nonfiction essay autobiography. And so he was considered one of the first. But what Paul Laurence Dunbar often spoke about, being born of emancipated people, free people, and having been the darling of white America as the voice of Black America in the late 19th century, is that's that poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. And so, you know, he's talking about being pressured to censor himself for his white audience because those were his patrons. We also had this happen later on with Richard Wright when he was doing Another Sun. The version that was published in Europe, American publishers said, we cannot do this with Bigger. This is not going to work. And so you have multiple iterations of A Native Son because who's controlling it determines what gets out. And Zora Hurston said this too, what white publishers won't print. And this is an essay from, I want to say, around 1956. And she's saying that white publishers are not going to be interested essentially in the substantive interiors of Black lives. So there's something to be said about the fact that even in the Black Power movement, the Black Arts movement, my aunt, my late great aunt was a member of the Black Arts movement with Quincy Troupe and Sophia Henderson Holmes. And she, you know, they had these artist collectives, They didn't do the big publishing, but I have all of, you know, the original pamphlets from the 1960s, 1970s. I think that those artist collectives are powerful because you get to have this community in which everyone is invested in what the product is going to be. And so the poetry readings, the lectures, all of that. Sekou Sundiata was also a part of that artist collective. And there's something about being able to have that control of your voice. So it's not until around, I would say from an historical standpoint, before I stopped, because I know everyone's like, oh, I didn't go to school today.
That's okay.
I would say,
No, it's fine.
I would say that we see more integration in which Black people are getting book deals. The real big boom is 1960s. And that's where you see Terry McMillan, right? Toni Morrison was already an editor and already had her deal. She already had success, you know, with her first publication, but it's really not commercially viable for Black lit until the 1980s. And then Latinx in the 1990s. Asian Americans, I would say Amy Tan is probably one of the big booms, and that's also with the Joy Luck Club, and that's like mid to late 1980s. So they all have their trends, you know, they all have their trends, the ebbs and the flows. But if you're trying to read the voices from people of certain communities, if they're not cherry picked by the establishment, they almost get pushed completely out. And so that's why those independent publications become so important.
Right.
So
and actually, no, your final point was the point. Like that's exactly what I was fishing for, and you like nailed it absolutely. I'm sorry. Did anyone else want to chime in on this? Did anyone else want to jump in and say something in regards to this particular topic?
Nah.
Okay. All right.
Like,
all right.
killed it. She
killed it. She killed it. She killed it. That's all right. So let's talk a little bit about acceptance within the community, right? Because this is a touchy one, right? Like, you know, not only do we have to figure out how that we can navigate white spaces in some way, right? Like to tell our stories or navigate around them, you know, but also we have to look internally and, you know, sometimes maybe even ask ourselves, are we ready for this type of story to be told? Are we ready for this type of character to be thrust into a spotlight? Like, is this the right time for that? Like, how do you guys feel about that in terms of acceptance within the community? Like, do you feel welcomed all the time? Do you feel, have there ever been instances where maybe you were like, maybe this isn't the right time for this, or someone has come up to you and been like, this is not the right time for this. And I'm looking at you right now. I'm looking at you right now, David, because I know your book, I'm sure has gotten a fair amount of like of criticism too, right?
Yeah, like the first time that, you know, I came up with it and I knew the story that I wanted to tell, when I hired Cortland Ellis, who drew like the cover and he drew the first couple of issues, you know, I said to him, I said, hey, I have this idea for a comic book. And he's like, cool, what's it about? I'm like, it's called Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer. And he was like, we're going to get in so much trouble. Let's do it. And so he draw the cover. like he drew the cover and he, you know, I thought, I was like, cool, man, this is awesome. And then I posted it and I thought, you know, I'm like, all right, a bunch of like, you know, like crazy, like white Republicans are going to be like really mad about this. They're going to say something, but it was my people who were mad. They were like, how dare you do this to Aunt Harriet? Your mama didn't raise you right. That's what it is. Your mama didn't raise you right. And I'm like, and like, I don't know if I can curse on this. I can curse on this panel, right?
I think we're allowed to curse on this panel.
Oh, people were like, yo, fuck David Crownson. This is disrespect. And these are strangers. Like, just the it was the cover of issue 1 and it went like viral and stuff. And like, it was 80% like, oh, this looks dope. But then that 20% of like 40 comments of like, this is disrespectful. I won't support this when it comes out. And then, so I got like really like nervous and really tense. So I was going to like, oh, let me delete my life.
Right,
you know? It was on Twitter and it was on Facebook and it was on Instagram, and like there was a think piece in 10 minutes. Like, what does this mean to the Black community? And I'm like, I'm just a guy who made a comment. I'm not Rosa Parks. What is this? What's going on? And so like, but then one of my friends was just like, hey, like, yes, you're doing this because you want people to like it, but you made this organically from yourself, you know, and just make the book you want to read, and people will communicate. They'll get it the way you will be really invested in it. Like, hopefully they'll get it, and if not, oh well. And so I just kind of ignored like the trolls of it, and kind of was like, okay, these are just comments on a Facebook thing, and no one's read it yet. They're just kind of reacting to it. There's nothing there for them to look at. But also understanding at the time, like, there's no Harriet Tubman movie, and there wasn't even like a frame of reference about Harriet Tubman, except for a very trashy individual who made some weird porn about the Harriet Tubman.
God.
It was like, it was crazy. And I'm like, yo, that's disrespectful. It's Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer, not Harriet Tubman twerking on ice or some shit.
Exactly.
You know? So I was like confident in what I was doing, and then I just waited to, you know, the book came out, and then people read it. People took it, but then also you can't really pay attention, because there was one guy who was like, hey, yo, fuck this comic, it's corny, and fuck you. And I'm like, yo, have you read the comic? It's $2.99 on Comixology. Like, just go. Mm-hmm. And he was like, all right, I'm gonna read this comic. And then like he came back 10 minutes later, hey, yo, the art was dope, and I like the comic, but you still corny. So like, no matter what, you know, people are gonna have their points of view, and everyone's entitled to their point of view. Right now, I'm like, cool, give me attention, and, you know, buy it, and like you can't worry about it too much. You just got to worry about the story you want to tell, and hope that everything you wanted to communicate within that story resonates. And if it does, awesome.
Yeah, there you go.
And even if it doesn't, awesome, because you still did it. Right. You know, like there's lots of people I know, great writers, who have dope ideas. They're not executing it, or they're not taking the steps to put it out there. They're too hung up on, oh, it has to be perfect, or it must speak to the Black community. And this, what I'm like, yeah, just make the story.
Just make the story. No, something can be said for that, 100%. Anyone else want to chime in regards to just struggling with acceptance within the community, or anything of that nature?
I think with myself, from what I've seen, it's twofold. Like, you have some that are really, really, really ready for it, and they're buying our books with no problems. Then you have the other side, which is like me living in Colorado. Right. I run into the other side a lot in Colorado. I'm not the only Black guy here. There's a lot of us here, but I run into that other side, where I actually did a con here, and two instances that I had. One of them, like, by doing, his girlfriend was walking by. He saw the comics, and he was like, yo, that's dope. And he saw the banner, saw my whole Black lineup of my Justice League almost, you know, like, yo, that's dope. Wanted to pick it up. Girlfriend snatches him away. We ain't going over there. We ain't going over there. I'm like, wow. He's like, but you've been saying you want more Black characters. I've been wanting more Black characters. I hear him talking around the corner with an earshot, and I'm just like, I hope the owl gets louder, because I don't want to hear this conversation. And she's like, no, we're not going over there. Let's go look for Spider-Man, I think is what she said. Second instance was a grandmother and her kids and her grandkids. They saw it, were running to the table like, Grandma, look at this. And she looks at me, looks at the comics on the table, looks at the banner, and as loud as possible, because I mean, people at their tables turned around and looked at my table. And she was like, I don't know what that is. She's like, I don't know what that is. I'm not going over there. Y'all come on, and grabbed him and left. And and it was funny, because when that happened, that was the second time that happened that day. And I'm just sitting here, and I'm like, that's when I started. I'm like, should I just make all my characters white then? Like, because it seems like nobody here is accepting them, you know. And but the crazy part, with the part that really kind of boosted me up, was like, I have this group of individuals here, and they're all Latino dudes, and every time, like if I do a free comic book day or if I'm at a con that's here in Colorado, they try to get there. They try to buy my comics. And the dude just turned around. He was like, well, if you came over here and read it, you'll know what it's about. And I was like, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. But like I said, in that same aspect where I think it's 50-50, I think it's some of us that are ready for it and some of us that aren't. That some of us that's ready for it, it was a group of Black women came through, saw my title, Orisha Exos, which is a title, a mech-based title that takes place in the future. The main character, she's this Black girl with this big old green afro, you know, and they saw her and they were like, I want everything. And they brought like $70 worth of stuff right there on the spot. So, I mean, I think it's like some of us are ready. A lot of us aren't. Some of us aren't. Like we still want to cuddle up behind, you know, Marvel and DC and want them to create the things that we want rather than going out there and seeing the individuals that are already creating the things that we want. We want to change them instead of go to the people that are already doing what it is that we're asking for. And to me, that's shooting ourselves in the foot. And is like I said, it's both sides. We got some that do and some that don't. So
no, I could tell you, like one of the most disheartening conversations I've ever had with somebody was a fan of like you know, she was African American. She was a fan of like science fiction fantasy, and she was like ranting on Twitter, of course, right? That's what people do on Twitter, and of course, and you know, ultimately our back and forth boiled down to if this upsets you that much. And I don't remember the full context of the conversation, but this upsets you that much, you should try creating something. Like you should create something that speaks to you directly. And I remember her response was like, well, I don't have the money to do that or the time. And like, that should be their responsibility. And it's like, well, it has to be someone's responsibility. Like, you know what I mean? And so that was very disheartening, but I also think that was a wake up call for me as well, to just kind of be like, I need to be, you know, it's corny to say, but the change I want to see. Anybody else want to talk about the yes, Shamika, go for it.
I'm ready.
Right. So with Salam Family, because some of the creators are doing religious comics versus secular comics, there can be some issues with how characters are portrayed and what some of the topics are, because, you know, of religious perspectives. And so I think with Kamala Khan, they were very strategic to stay away from some of those very sensitive issues with religiosity. But for some of the comics creators that I've worked with on my panels, I had panels at San Diego, I had panel at C2E2, I had panels at New York Comic Con, all around Salam fandom. And for the folks who are doing secular work, you know, they also have talked about sometimes doing things in secret because their family might be more conservative and might judge them for doing things that are secular. You know, keeping their cosplay secret, you know, so there are times when the fandom can be difficult internally, especially when there are different voices, right? And so when it comes to some people that are doing like Christian comics, you know, depending on that orthodoxy, they have to be very careful to make sure that their religious communities are okay with what they say or how they decide to present a particular narrative. And that's something that I've seen become more openly discussed with Muslim comics creators and fans and geeks and nerds about how the criticism outside is not as bad as some of the internal criticism with the expectations of what it means to, you know, what you're creating or what you're doing and whether or not it's okay according to scripture and ideology.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's a big part of it too. Like, and actually I kind of think that speaks to my next question. But before I jump in, did anybody else have anything else to say on this particular topic? What's up? Let's go for it, Carl. I think you're muted.
I
think it's Mike muted.
What everybody else said.
Hey, Carl. Carl. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was just gonna say start over again because you were muted for a second.
Okay. Yeah, adding to what everybody else said. You know, it's especially hard when you think about you know, Black creators and this kind of geek subculture that has a very high bar of quality. You know, we want to see we want to see top quality. We want to see great art. We want to see great writing. We want to see everything has to be at this high level, and which is great. You know, we're like I was thinking earlier when David was talking, you know, fortune favors the bold. The first people to get out there and kind of do a play on a Black historical figure, or a cosplayer to break the kind of mold of what, you know, Black people are interested in. That's great. But for a while, it's going to be very different and very hated. And, you know, when you do something new, you might not always be able to get the quality that you want to get. You might not always be able to, especially if you're trying to get it out, and you have to do it in nights and weekends, and you have to do it in times where you have to basically steal time to get things done to really push the future. And so, again, we have to commend every one of us for being super bold and getting out there and being these influences and tastemakers, because and what that means to me is that we have to go a little bit further and support even when it might not be 100% perfect, and we have to support even when it might not, we might be a little turned off by the content. You know, I think we shouldn't be quiet. We shouldn't hold our tongues. So if we have something that can improve the book or improve the characters, or if we find something distasteful or inaccurate or something, we should scream from the rafters. But we have to be careful not to hold ourselves to a higher standard than we're holding other people.
Absolutely,
Right.
absolutely. So okay, we ate up time already. This is crazy. So okay, so I don't get yelled at by Crown again. I want you guys to go around and shout out something not by you that you think is kind of bridging the gap between accuracy and acceptance. It's just doing a very stellar job of it right now. But then on top of that, I want you to also shout out your own work, just so we could wrap this up in a nice, timely fashion. So I'm going to start with Devon first. Devon, who do you think is crushing it right now? And also shout yourself out.
Okay. Aside from David Crownson's work on Harriet Tubman, which is dope, I supported the Kickstarter. I'm also in awe of Sebastian A. Jones, who's who got the big contract with HBO to produce his Asunda universe.
Yeah.
Like I'm excited to see that come to fruition and see where that goes from there. And also wanted to shout out my current graphic novel that I'm working on called Love is Sketchy, which is a romantic comedy graphic novel that takes place in the comic and geek pop culture world, from the perspective of a comic book artist and a cosplayer and their journey as they find each other.
Okay, awesome.
That's cool.
Awesome. David, who do you think is killing the game right now? And also shout out your comic and where they can get it.
Yeah, I think there's Greg Anderson, LSA, who has his Isnana, the Were Spider, like comic book series, and he has The Gentleman, and he just keeps on putting out books. And like with me, I'm like Harriet Tubman, Demon Slayer, and then now I'm gonna kind of sort of do my other thing. But he's always having different stories coming out. And I also think Jason Reeves, who does 133 art, is incredible, because not only does he have his own printing company where he prints my comic and helps me distribute that. Like comic book store owners are like, hey, who is that? Like the quality of paper and packaging is 100 times better than Diamond. And I'm like, it's Jason, and he just does it in his garage.
Hey, Diamond's not responsible for that, David. Thank you very much.
Hey, all I'm just saying, he's killing it in the printing game, and he also like makes his own comics on top of that, as far as printing like other like Black and Deep creator.
Oh, yeah.
So I think those gentlemen, and Sebastian Jones is killing. He's one of my good friends. I'm so happy and excited for him. And David Walker's killing it with Bitterroot and having his own publishing company. And I do Harry Tubman Demon Slayer, and I started my own publishing company, Kingwood Comics. That's right, where Black is king. And you can find us on Comixology and Peep Game Comics, and I have another book coming out in 2021 called Nightmare in Newark, which is about a young Black woman coming out to her parents on Thanksgiving. But in the middle of her coming out to her family, there's an alien invasion just erupts. So she has to survive this alien invasion and come out to her family.
Hey, no time like the present, I guess. Shamika, first of all, who can you shout out, and then tell us what you want people, just whatever you want people to know about that you're working on, that you're a part of.
Well, in terms of, I would say in terms of Muslim comics artists, two of the series that are really dope right now, there's Latifa, Latifa, and that is published, it's the first Saudi superhero woman. And the creator of it, one of the creators of it, is actually one of the princes of the Saudi royal family.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And that debuted, I'm going to say Latifa debuted probably in late 2018. There's The Last Ansars by Omar Mirza, and that is a fantasy Arabian adventure with lots of fighting. That's like the best way to put it. And that went really well in Algiers too. I would have to say people were really taken by The Last Ansars. In terms of women in comics, I am a member of Women in Comics. Shout out to Janine Sawyer. Definitely Eating Vampires. You got to check her out. And Micheline has does a really cool series with Caribbean folklore. And it's the children's book series. So I would say if you can, like, these would probably be really fun. And they're very different stylistically. The work that I'm doing, I just took on role as editor and creative guide at Unstoppable Comics, which also centers on folklore, and that's with JD Rosario. And then the book that I am included in is called Unstable Masks, Whiteness in American Superhero Comics, and that came out in January under the Ohio State University Press. I wrote about Milestone. So if you're interested in Milestone, you might be interested in what I had to say about Milestone. You catch me at the table of contents. I am also working on some other Salon fandom projects. I'm writing 2 and editing 1. So we'll see how that goes. But other than that, I am a SUNY professor at Rockland Community College, and we have classes. So I'll be grading papers this weekend.
Okay. Other than that, I'd say that's plenty. You guys are making me so lazy. What about you, Tyrone? What do you have to shout out, and what do you want people to know where to find your stuff?
Okay, so for shout out, man. Okay, so there's Devon Camel. He's up here with us because I did love his comics that he has about his mech, and yeah, he knows what I'm talking about. I like what he's doing, and also I have Vonell Williams, which I am actually helping him with his 2nd season of his comic, which is called Delta Dogs. It's pretty much a comic book about a family, group of cousins and everything. And on this weird mishap, 90s type, old superhero type of night, they come across the green dude is all he's called. And with their encounter with him, they end up getting these special powers. So now they're trying to navigate school life and the gangs on the street that they have to deal with in the areas that they grew up with, and trying to stop them because one of the cousins, kind of deals in that life, and trying to stop them, but also is telling the story about them becoming heroes in their own path as they're going through all of that. So that's a good one to check out. He has 10 issues out right now, and the 11th one to be out soon. Also, I want to shout out Thomas Johnson, who has Raxon Universal. That's another mecha type story. I like mecha stories, as you can tell, but that's another mecha type story. So if you were into Gundam and anything like that, definitely pick up his books. He has, I think, 12 books out right now.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
So definitely pick his up in it. And it's a complicated story. You'll definitely have to read it. That's the reason why I always use Gundam as a reference, because anybody who's watched or read Gundam, Gundam is a complicated story. So So definitely check him out. And and as far as myself, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, under Sovereign Comics, SOVEREIGN COMICS. Right now, at the moment, I do have a Kickstarter that is live called Stars, which is pretty much, it follows a group of women who pretty much meet in LA through their love of music. So they start their own like indie rock band. But as they're going through all of this stuff with their rock band and getting everything straight and trying to find these gigs, they find out that each one of them are a zenith, and that's what I call my mutants in the Sovereign Comics universe. And so through the suggestion of one of the individuals who ends up becoming the leader, whose code name is Siphon, she's like, hey, how about we be heroes? You know, because like the crime in LA and Hollywood is rising, and like, how about we be heroes? And so they start doing the hero kick. But the twist on it is, what I try to do different is they really don't know what they're doing. There's like, you know, Shy, she was trained by her dad, who's a former Marine. You know, I've used former Marines and Army a lot because I'm a vet myself, Marine Corps and Army. So I use that a lot because that's a walk of life that I have. And I put that in my comics. So she's trained how to fight by her dad. And then one of the other individuals who's from the Dominican Republic, her parents were superheroes, well-known superheroes in the Dominican Republic. So she has that life, but she wanted to get away from that life. So now she's kind of getting brought back into it. But it's a pretty good story. People who've read it, they like it so far. So if you are into, you know, music and superhero crossing up, that would probably be a good title for you. Other than that, I have 4 other titles. One is a Yamo Stigmata about a Tuskegee. This one actually gets a lot of people like it because it's about a Tuskegee Airman who gets slungshot to the other side of the galaxy during World War II because of 2 Foo Fighters. So like you have these 2 Foo Fighters scuffling in World War II, and he gets caught up and he gets slungshot to the other side of the galaxy. And now while he's out there, he's trying to navigate that lifestyle, and he goes from being hunted, you know, because he's the only Gaian human that's out there. So he goes from being hunted to becoming the hunter, and he's tasked with hunting down the top 100 bounties in the galaxy. So that's his story. And then there's Cypher Team, which has 2 issues out right now. And Yamo Stigmata also has 2 out. Cypher Team, which is our flagship comic. And that's pretty much about a unit that was pretty much brought back out of retirement to take on a hate group that was getting too powerful, or terrorist group. I'm calling what it really are, a terrorist group that was getting too powerful. And so they bring this unit back, pretty much bring them off the mothballs and everything. They're like, hey, you're going to come in and you're going to stop them. And this is one of the things that I don't, even though some people compare it to Justice League because it's a group of heroes, I don't call them heroes. I call them an anti-terrorism unit, because they will kill a villain if they need to. So they're not a hero in the ideal of heroes. I also have Orisha Exos, which is a story that takes place in the far future. 2020 has really kind of scared me because a lot of the things that happened in 2020 happened in the beginning of that story. So I wrote this story, like this story was published back in 2016, and it's pretty much about how the world is starting to kill itself, and well, not really kill itself. I would say the world started to poison herself because humanity, it was too many humans. We were destroying everything. So the world was like, okay, well, I'm gonna get rid of you. You're a cancer. I'm gonna get rid of you. So,
okay.
How does it end?
Yeah. So it's like, what's that? so like you have like all of these, like you have animals who are acting different and stuff, and they're killing humans and eating humans where they wouldn't have. You have plant life that like their whole point, like the pollen they're producing kills our food source. And so what ends up happening is like certain people on the planet leave certain people on the planet. I'll just leave that there. And so as the time goes on and everything, we start advancing our technology and everything. And as we start advancing our technology, we find this mech that's on the dark side of the moon that was just there. And no one knew it was there. And so they use that mech to pretty much reverse this technology. And while they're doing that, they get attacked by the individuals who left. And so they're like, they haven't had a war in over 400 years, so they really don't know how to fight. But that mech wakes up and picks a power source and a pilot to power it, and then it fights and protects them. And so they use that technology to build other mechs, and all of these mechs are named after Orisha. So you have Olaroon, Ogun, Shango, Oya. You have all of them, and all of these different mechs are named after a different Orisha.
I'm feeling the big robot theme. You guys are making me feel so lazy. I'm still trying to get through issue 4 of my book. Beddo, Well, what do you want to shout out? Who do you want to shout out? And what do you want to let people know where to find your stuff?
There's a lot of great stuff out there right now. One Kickstarter that I just did follow is a brother named TJ Sterling, and his book is called Okama.
Yeah.
Jay Sterling.
I back that.
It's tough.
Sorry.
Okamus, I think it's Okemus.
Mhm.
Everybody hasn't heard of it, check it out. It's dope.
Yep.
Me personally, I'm working on my own graphic novel. It's called Udeja. And the basic story is it's a group of youth trying to survive in a post-apocalyptic future.
Okay. All right. Always down for some post-apocalypse, especially
Yes.
even in 2020. What about you, Carl? Who do you want to shout out, and where can people find you?
There are too many people to shout out. There's so much good stuff going on right now. I like Johnny O'Brien and the guys at North Caesar, DKG72 at Foresight Studios. Some funny stuff out there. Anthony Piper's Trio League and like Chuck Collins, Bounce. Dedrin Sneed and Marco Lopez just started Subsume. And so looking forward to the stuff that comes out of that. So much stuff right now. And I know a million other ones, right? Our sales, our publishing is still going and going strong. We're really excited about some of our new animation releases as well. So just look out for some of our stuff coming soon.
All right, awesome. And guys, thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate the perspective. I appreciate the history. I appreciate just finding out more about your individual creations. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks for hanging in and commenting. And this has been Back to Black, Accuracy versus Acceptance. And be sure to keep watching MechaCon for more panels like this one. Maybe not as good as this one, but definitely like this one. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Peace, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
See you guys.